I've got a vehicle running from us.
Have you ever wondered what it's like to work in law enforcement? From deputies on patrol, what it's like to work in corrections, dig into some cold case investigations, and reveal the multitude of untold stories of how our officers give back to the community. All stories from your neighbors, the hard-working men and women who serve the citizens of York County.
I can back 144 on 5.
This is YCSO Behind the Badge, the official podcast of the York County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to Behind the Badge, the official podcast of the York County Sheriff's Office. I'm Trent Ferris, Public Information Officer for the York County Sheriff's Office, and also your host for the next 30 minutes or so. And also, always go check us out on our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where you can also listen to this podcast on YouTube if you don't have a podcasting service. And lastly, sign up for those Notify Me alerts straight to your phone and email at yorkcountysheriff.com. Because when a major event arrives or happens in the county that we feel that needs your attention, we send you notifications to your area. So, for instance, like folks in Catawba won't get alerts about things going on in Sharon. And we've used it countywide. We've used it for searching for missing children, suspects running from deputies, and even severe weather events. So it's pretty handy when you need information straight to your phone or email. We mention all this to you because though we are thankful for our partnerships with the local newspapers, TV stations, and radio, but we also like to get it information straight to you from us because we are responsible to you, our local citizens, and we like to get that information, the right information, to the right people at exactly the right time. So, with all that said, let's move on. Today's podcast is right on the heels of our memorial podcast for Brent McCants, if you listened to that last week. The line of duty death of Brent McCants. And today we're going to talk about a lesser known line of duty death from 102 years ago in 1918. But before we get going, I need to introduce you to our guest today, the man who saved me from a life of working in the news mines up in the television news world. And my wife also thanks him every time he sees her because he saved me from the television news mines. I'll never forget it. Trent, come be my PIO. The man across the table from me is the former sheriff and now representative in District 48, South Carolina House District 48, Bruce Bryant. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Trent. It's great to be here. I tell you, walking in here this morning, it's been a long time, probably a year or so since I've walked through these halls.
And you haven't seen all the new stuff.
I haven't seen all the new stuff. I stay busy with different things going on in the house and trying to deal with constituent issues. But what a beautiful place that y'all have made this. It's completely way more spacious. Thank God, because we were out of room, and this was not built before we needed it. That's
right.
For sure. But it's good to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, before we get started, anything you got going on down in the State House?
Oh boy, we've been in session for the last 2 weeks, and just trying to pick up on a lot of the issues that we left in limbo due to the coronavirus. And we just went back and dealt with some school issues and a lot of different little things not little things, but a lot of things that was left undone.
Right.
And so now we back on break. It's a sort of a scary place down there when you put 124 members of the House of Representatives in one room, and everybody's breathing down everybody's neck and everybody's wearing masks, and it's been quite a challenge for us in the State House, and we just tried to remain as safe as we possibly could. But on the flip side, we had to do the people's business.
I guess the COVID's kind of thrown everything for a loop.
It has that. Statewide, just about every issue that we deal with, it has some ramifications that relate back to the COVID, the reason we're having to do certain things, certain ways, that we normally probably, wouldn't even think about being bothered with, you know. But, there's so many things that we have to do to protect our youth and our children and our teachers and our parents, and trying to get everybody sort of singing from the same sheet of music. for lack of a better way of expressing.
Yeah.
And I think we've done a great job in the last 2 weeks to try to get everybody back on track in our school systems. That's what's the most important.
Well, good. Well, I just want to let everybody know what you've been up to since you've been out, for, 2017 is when
I left
Kevin,
here
Sheriff Tolson took over?
January 2017.
That's right.
And then I've been in the State House since June of 2017. So I didn't get a very much of a vacation.
Not
or
much
a
of a
break.
retirement.
I promised my wife, we made all these plans how we were going to travel. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I'm telling you, since 2017, this world has changed so much. And, we haven't got to do the things we wanted to.
No.
And I've got, I pray this virus will soon be over where we can go back and make some plans of doing a few things that we had planned to do.
Well, good. Well, Sheriff, I'm sorry. Well, it's hard for me to call you anything else.
Listen, in the State House, nobody knows my name.
They just call you Sheriff?
Yeah, nobody. I'm telling you, nobody in that State House, I don't think, knows my name because I go by Sheriff. And I tell them, I say, well, yeah, that's fine. Call me Sheriff because that's a whole lot more respectable than representative or House member.
Bingo. There you go.
They sort of frown when I say that, but I truly believe that to be the truth.
Well, okay, I'm just going to call you Sheriff then.
That's fine.
Because that's the only thing I can.
Kevin doesn't get jealous,
Sorry. Sheriff Tolson, Sheriff Bryant. I mean, you're both a sheriff to me, so it's new sheriff, old sheriff.
That's right.
But anyhow, well, the reason I brought you in today was, because your love of history and my love of history, and back when you were in office, you came to me with a poster and said, "Hey, Trent, I got this poster, and it's a wanted poster from 1918 of a tragedy, really, and it was one of those things that kind of fell through the cracks of history." And you said, get to work on this because history is important to you about the sheriff's office anyhow, right?
Trent, if York County has a weak link to our past, it's that people don't preserve our history
The way they should.
You know that in 1996, when I was elected sheriff of York County, and I walked in the doors of the York County Sheriff's Office, I said, "Where's the history? Where do I find who the former sheriffs were?" "Sheriff, we don't have that." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Well, the clerk of court will have it."
Yeah.
I go to the clerk of court. The clerk of court said, "We can't tell you who were the former clerks of court, let alone who the former sheriffs are."
Right.
There is no record kept of that. There's no record kept of the solicitors. And that bothered me. And even the coroners, all these are countywide elected officials. And no one had a history. And so we made it a project here at the York County Sheriff's Office to identify all the former sheriffs. And so that's really where I got real hooked into the history of not only of the former sheriffs, but also of the history, a lot of history of York County that I had no knowledge of. And especially my interest was the former sheriffs and, what did they do? What happened during their time frame? And a lot of them we've identified, every one of them.
All of them.
Sheriff Tolson, I think, is number 34. I think I was number 33, if I'm not mistaken. And, you go back and you look at that and you think, gosh, I'm the 33rd sheriff. That's not many sheriffs before me.
Right.
And but when you start thinking about length of service and those type things, it gets way back into history. And, we know that our first sheriff, I believe, was 1786. And
Colonel Hawthorne,
Lieutenant Colonel Hawthorne. Exactly right. And the things that's so interesting to tell you a little bit about history and a little bit of how things are different. Lieutenant Hawthorne, when he and his family settled here in this area, his mother Lieutenant Hawthorne actually, James Hawthorne was his first name, but James Hawthorne and his mother and his two sisters were captured by the Indians, and the Indians killed his mother and his sisters. And somehow, I don't know, we don't know, it's not in history, how he was released. but that's when he ended back up in Yorkville and opened a blacksmith shop, and later went on to marry Colonel Hill's daughter and fought in the Revolutionary War.
He fought at Kings Mountain.
That's exactly right. And the things that, these things are just such an interest to me. But anyway, let's talk about sheriffs, okay?
I could tell you all
not
day.
Not sheriffs, but law enforcement.
Well,
okay?
we do have a list, and I've and most of the stuff we have is from old newspapers.
Oh yeah.
And I've gotten something from all the way back to Sheriff Stillwell back in the 1850s. I think that's what it was. But it was more of like, hey, the friends of Sheriff Stillwell want you to vote for him. That's the thing we have from a newspaper.
That was what was in the paper.
That was in the paper.
We've been to Charleston and to Columbia, to all the places that store history of South Carolina, and researched all these things. But all that's interesting.
Yeah,
but one of the things that really slipped, and what we're here to talk about today, one of the things that really slipped through the cracks, we've been doing memorial services for years and years and years. Matter of fact, we did the first memorial service. Dave Morton and I were real close. Dave he was formerly South Carolina Highway Patrol and ended up being chief of police for the city of York.
Yep.
And he and I did a law enforcement memorial service, and it was located in the garden area, the breezeway of the old York County Agriculture Building.
Oh,
we
right.
set up tents and had chairs sitting out there, and we had the first memorial service. And then we went on and started having memorial service, and we were recognizing all the police in York County that had been slain. And there was this guy that walked in fact, can I go in? You go ahead and go into the story?
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a guy that walked into York Police Station, David Morton. I keep saying Dave Fortson. Dave Fortson, another dear friend of mine. But Dave Morton was sitting behind his desk, and he and Bill Mobley, Captain Mobley then, and now went on to be the chief.
Yep.
But this man walks in with this poster, and this poster was a poster that he found in a house in Spartanburg, South Carolina. He found this thing in the wall. He was remodeling the house. And this old poster, was in the wall of this house. And it was a poster that said, wanted for murder, $700 reward. And then it went on to say that on September the 30th, Mills Moore and Frank Moore, which we later found out to be two brothers, shot and killed T.R. Penninger, who was a policeman in Sharon, South Carolina.
Right.
Wow. I mean, this hit us like a brick wall. Who is this T.R. Penninger?
Right.
So we started doing some research and study and trying to find the articles on it.
Yep.
Because he had never been brought to any of our attention. And, I'd been of course, I was in law enforcement here for 45 years, and I'd never heard anything about this.
It was news to me when you showed it to me.
Oh, yeah. And but anyway, I held on to this copy of this poster. This man would not let Chief Morton have this poster. And, I'd give anything to find out who this man is in Spartanburg.
Yeah.
And where this original poster is located.
Right.
Because I would like to buy it and frame it and put it here at the sheriff's office and preserve this history, or give it to the York County, historical group.
Well, it would be something that would, because I'm sure back in 1918, I mean, to print a poster was quite the undertaking. You just didn't print things off like we have a printer behind me at my desk here. You had to go off and make a plate for that. And
absolutely. It had to be a plate, and it appears that who made this plate, or who printed this, did a great job.
Yeah.
The printing is so clear, and especially after you think how many years. And I guess inside the walls of this old house, it preserved this print. But
and I know that in the PIO world, it got the message across.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was a message like wanted for murder, police officer in Sharon shot.
Yes,
and they made theirs. Yeah.
Descriptions of Mills Moore and Frank Moore, but we went on and started looking at and researching this particular case, and found out, man, this is real stuff. This all was so true. And that's when I I brought this poster. I didn't have time as sheriff to do the things that I wanted done, so I brought this poster and I delivered it to a great employee of mine by the name of Trent Ferris.
Oh man!
And Trent
thanks.
got on the job. So Trent,
Well,
I can't. I don't want to take anything away from
No.
you, and I just appreciate. I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
Have we applied to the National Law Enforcement Memorial Group to put this name on the monument in Washington, D.C.?
Not yet. There's
Okay.
22,000 names on that wall, which include Mike Doty and
Brent
McCants and Elliot Harris. But we are going to work diligently on to getting T.R. Penninger's name on it because, for folks who don't know, back in 1918, sheriffs appointed town constables or town marshals because now, like you said, we're a full-service law enforcement agency, and the sheriff had, I think they probably rode around on horses back in 1918. I don't know. I mean, that's probably how they got it. They would have.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I mean, the man ran the local blacksmith shop.
Yeah, he was a blacksmith on the side and a law enforcement officer on the side, and he basically was the town, the chief of Sharon, little tiny Sharon out there in western York County. And on September 30th, he was doing his job. We'll go into this a little bit. For most folks, if you're listening to the podcast, Sharon is a town out in western York County, west of York. If you see York County is the shape of your hand, and York is in the middle of your hand, Sharon is west of York.
Trent, one of the ways I describe Sharon, I said, well, if you were on Main Street in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you left Main Street in Charlotte, you would go right straight through Main Street in York. And if you keep on staying on 49, you're going to go through Main Street in Sharon.
Bingo. It just goes
Absolutely.
straight through there. So back in 1918, from what we gathered, T.R. Penninger was the blacksmith, like we mentioned. He was, I'm sure he's the man that everyone needed a shoe for their horse fixed and this and that fixed. He was the town blacksmith.
Absolutely. Fixed the buggies and everything, I'm sure.
But he was also appointed the town marshal or the constable. And then, as a former sheriff, I mean, that was commonplace.
Trent,
back
let
then,
me
right?
just comment about that. That certainly was a very, very common thing. And all my Western fans out there, and I'm a Western fanatic, if you look, you see a lot, and even today there's some discrepancies about law enforcement and positions. But back then, the town clerk or town mayor could appoint someone, but to give them the law enforcement authority today, if it's like it is today, he would have to be approved by the sheriff and working under the sheriff's domain to work in a place like Sharon or wherever. But even today, there's a lot of discrepancies between constables and marshals and deputies, and in America we still have city sheriffs.
Really?
Right, one of our not too far away neighbors, Virginia, there's city sheriffs in the state of Virginia.
Would they be considered like a police chief of a city, or
They're the
thing?
same thing as a police chief.
Yeah.
But they are elected.
Huh.
That makes them different. You elect your chief of police, and he's called a sheriff. Well, back if you look at it in the days of the Old West and all, there was United States Marshals, and there was just marshals for territories in the West. And there was no such thing as a chief of police in the West.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I get it.
But so the terminology that we have on T.R. Penninger, that actually he was a marshal.
Yeah.
So we're assuming, making an assumption that he was appointed probably by the sitting sheriff then, which was Sheriff Fred Quinn.
Right.
And so we assume that he appointed him the law enforcement authority. Either he or the mayor. It doesn't really matter. It's still, he was a police officer.
Right. And so, I mean, of course, Sheriff Quinn was probably in York, and then it would take him a while to get to Sharon to follow things. You know, between now, I mean, it takes us like 15 minutes to get Sharon from here.
Yeah.
You know, back then it probably took them an hour, 2 hours.
Probably at least an hour. Yeah.
So on this particular day, Penninger was working in his blacksmith shop like most days. And however, earlier in the day, the mayor of Sharon, J. Luther Whitesides, got into a heated argument with Frank and Mills Moore about $25 fine because of their mother, Mary Brown, running a quote-unquote disorderly house.
Yeah, it's been identified as a house of ill repute.
There you go.
I think is the way they.
If you're picking up what we're putting down.
That's right.
She should not be running this, and it was only a $25 fine.
That's right.
$25 though in 1918, I did some research, would be $430 today, equivalently. You know, so it wasn't. You know, we think, oh, $25, pay the fine, go home. But back in 1918, $430, if you had to.
A lot of money.
$25 was a lot of money. So, anyhow, they go about this, and the two men left to find $25. Now, Penninger was holding Brown's car, the mother of Mills Moore, Mary Brown, and they were holding her car. I'm sure in 1918, a car was probably a hot commodity to have if you didn't have a car.
Think about it. Yeah.
And it was, I don't know if it was a Model T or whatever, but it was probably one of those old Model T looking type vehicles. And so they used it to hold it as collateral until the fine was paid. And around noon that day, the Moores brothers asked to see the mayor at Penninger's blacksmith shop. I guess that's where he ran the business out of, or ran his law enforcement duties out of while he was fixing horses and working on different types of items. And so when the mayor arrived, the Moore brothers were standing outside with Penninger. They paid the $25, but the mayor told them that was not the only case they had to settle, and there was an outstanding warrant on them for disorderly conduct from the argument that they had earlier in the day with the mayor. In anger, while Penninger was reading the warrant, Frank Moore hit Penninger over the head with his pistol. And as Penninger was trying to cross to safety into his blacksmith shop, Mills Moore shot Penninger twice in the back, killing him instantly.
So I would say, and of course, in 1918, maybe everybody had a weapon. I don't know, but it certainly sounds like there was two weapons. One that that Frank hit him with, and the other one that Mills shot him.
Yeah,
and killed him instantly.
Twice in the back, as he was trying to get away.
And killed him instantly, laying right there in front of the blacksmith shop.
And if you want to know, doing all of our research, the next time you go through the town of Sharon, if you want to know where this blacksmith shop was, we've kind of pinpointed it down to where what's the tall building down there? The
Hill.
The Hill building.
Mm-hmm.
If you're standing right in front of the Hill building in Sharon, the blacksmith shop was to the left. That where you're best to figure out.
On the same side of the street.
Same side of the street to the left.
Right.
I think there was it's either a lawn and garden place or something there to the left. Or
a pizza place maybe?
Something.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's something else there now, but at the time, if you think about it, there was a blacksmith shop sitting right there next to that building. So just to give you some geographic look here. So right after that, he shot him. Brown, the mother of these two men, yelled at him and said, "Mills, quote, Mills, you've killed that man." And the men backed off, pointing their weapons at Mayor Whitesides. So they were pointing their guns as they were trying to get away from this guy. And after that, 100 people, whether they were sworn or not, helped Sheriff Quinn join in a manhunt. I guess this is the early days of the York County Sheriff's K-9 unit.
Well, certainly the K-9 unit didn't stay in effect the whole time, but yeah, I mean, the bloodhounds were a tool that certainly the old-time sheriffs used to hunt down the bad people. And I've read documentations where this person, I think this manhunt ended up down through Bullocks Creek and back into Chester County. And
McConnellsville. It's McConnell's, but then it was called McConnellsville.
Oh, yeah, McConnellsville. And of course, York, was Yorkville still then. But it was quite a manhunt for this individual. And they weren't that successful that day.
And the funny thing is, I mean, they ran around all through the woods, and I think they even said in one article I read that they actually, I don't have it here on my notes, but I remember going through all this research. I remember that they said that they could hear the bloodhounds as they were running through the woods. They were running through a creek, Bullocks Creek, I guess. They were running through a creek, and they knew that they were getting close. And they ended up in some other woman's house and pretended to be. I think I have it right here in this book if I can find it. But I think they pretended to be religious men, missionaries or something like that.
They were on a mission, all right.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. I wouldn't label them as missionaries, would you?
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. The two men identified now as Frank and Millsmore continue to remain at large for the next 2 months. In the first week of December, Sheriff Quinn received a telegram. We're getting ahead of ourselves here, but he told the sheriff that he and his posse were close behind them on the first day as they took flight to Bullocks Creek, turning east towards McConnellsville. And he said that he and his brother spent most of the second day in a cornfield near Turkey Creek, and that night they turned back towards Bullocks Creek and crossed the Broad River in a bateau. I don't know what that is, a Bateau. I guess that's a boat. A bateau, and continued on to Spartanburg. So, but the funny thing,
and that's what's so strange. This poster was found in Spartanburg.
Yeah. And the poster was probably put everywhere.
I understand, but I find it real ironic, especially back in 1918, that an individual could commit such a heinous crime in York County, and when they are caught, I think one of the guys was actually caught in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yep.
Like several months later, December, I think, after
I think that was Frank Moore was caught in.
Yeah. It was Frank.
Yeah, Frank was caught
in early December. But then when he's caught, he talks about Spartanburg, the location where this poster was found.
It was in Spartanburg.
Did they have this poster? Was that the house?
If I was running from police, I would want to have it.
I find that so interesting, and I just pray that the person that has possession of this poster that was brought to York PD, if he ever hears this podcast or somebody knows who he is,
or if anybody has a copy of this poster, we'll be glad to take it off your hands.
That would, and we talking about, I'll give a reward for it. This reward was $700. Now, what does that equate to today?
I think it would equate to $12,000 today.
$12,000.
And the cool thing was that $200 of that money was raised by the people of Sharon.
Isn't it?
This is back in 1918 when
that $200 would equate to
$1,200. That's what $1,700. $1,700. So
wow. That's interesting.
Well, it's good to know that back in 1918, people still had respect for their law enforcement officers. And we've had our tragedies. We've had Mike Doty. We've had Brent McCants. We've had all these different officers killed here. And the people of York County rally around us. And that, no matter what the narrative is across the country, it's always good to know, the folks here in York County, support their law enforcement. Right. For the most part, we do have our people who don't.
Well, of course you do.
Everywhere's got it.
Of course you do.
And the funny thing is, we also did the research, and we went on the Yorkville Enquirer. You can go online and find this. You can just search Yorkville Enquirer, and I think it was the National Library where you can go online and pull up old newspaper articles. And I found the newspaper in which this happened on September 30th.
September 30th.
And the paper didn't even have it, and it was like, Sheriff, you look at it, and it's like, this is the column, this is the article that they put in there. It's
wow.
If old newspapers, if you look at this newspaper and you look at it in columns of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 columns of the front page of the Yorkville Enquirer, the homicide at Sharon article of the killing of a police officer was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns over, and maybe
3 inches.
3 inches in little tiny letters.
Yeah, which is 2.5 inches down from the top of the.
Today it would be all over the place.
Yeah, it'd be half a page.
Half a page, front page, above the fold.
Yep.
And so, And the good thing is we did this, Sheriff, you got me on it. And, I minored in history in college, and I was, I'm going to go look for, this. And we did a bunch of research, but we didn't know where the family was. We had no idea if the family was still alive. I mean, I found an article about maybe his son or somebody had died in a train accident up in North Carolina, but we didn't know where he was or any of family members, descendants. And thankfully, because of this, we found some family members. We found some family members that are still living in Gaston County. And guess what? His grandson, I think it was his grandson became Chief of Police.
Chief of Police of the city of Gastonia.
Yep, I have that over here.
That is unreal.
Yeah, the G.F. Penninger became the Chief of Police in Gaston, North Carolina, or Gastonia. I don't know. Gaston County still does is it the county police and the sheriff?
You have a Gaston County Police Department, a Gaston County Sheriff's Office, and a Gastonia City Police Department. And he was the Chief of Police at Gastonia City.
Right, there you go. And he was the Chief of Police from 1953 to 1963, G.F. Penninger. And then in that, the sacrifice, kind of faded away. I mean, the family knew. It was a story that was passed down through the family over time. But it was one of those things where we had to do some searching. We had to go and we had to use the news and say, hey, news, we're trying to look for these people. We're trying to find the information on this 200, well, at the time, it was a 98-year-old wanted poster. That's when we did all the research and found it. But,
I just want to say thank you, Trent, for doing this research and everything that you've worked on in regards to the history. And you loved history, like you said, as much as I do. And there's been a tremendous amount of study that has been looked at over the years, and I've studied numerous things about Sheriff Quinn, but this never appeared. This never appeared in anything, the articles and stuff that I found on Sheriff Quinn. So I find it interesting that.
And Sheriff Quinn was quite the sheriff from all the articles I found on him.
Oh yes,
he would go on manhunts with the canines all the time.
Absolutely,
leading the way, running the dogs.
Trent, back then they didn't have the manpower that we have today.
It was about maybe five sheriff and 5 deputies, maybe.
I wouldn't. I'd hate to. Yeah, probably so. But of course, back when Sheriff Quinn was the sheriff of York County, I dare say there was 20,000 people in York County.
Yeah. And still
maybe.
South of Charlotte too. And Charlotte was still a bustling town at the time. So just to top it off here, early December of 1918, 28-year-old Frank Moore was 28 years old, and he was finally caught in Raleigh, North Carolina. He was brought back to York County by Sheriff Quinn. Mills Moore remained on the run until 1923. And that's where Sheriff Quinn got his man. He had to drive ride a horse all the way to Mississippi to bring him back into justice. And then
I think I read that he and one of his appointees actually went to Mississippi to get this person, and this person was denying that he was not this person that they were looking for. Right. So there was a lot of controversy about that. And
I think they were pretending to be. He was pretending to be a traveling preacher or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was. That's not me. Of course, it's like the old adage say that catch a guy today with narcotics in his pants, and it goes, "Oh, aren't my pants?"
Yeah. Absolutely.
And the crazy thing is, also, Sheriff, there's Frank Moore escaped from jail while serving just a 10-year sentence. A 10-year sentence.
And was never caught.
And it was never reapprehended. So he's wherever he's at. I'm sure he's not alive now, but
no, he would not. He would
unless
not
he's a long liver, being 100-something odd years old.
Yeah.
But that's the Cliff's Notes version of this story, and it's not just to tell you the story of the history. It's to tell you the story of a law enforcement officer was killed in the line of duty, serving a warrant, and Absolutely. It was just one of those things that got forgotten.
When he was in his blacksmith shop that morning,
probably just
like law enforcement today when they leave the house, do you think that he would believe that before the day was over that
Right.
he would be killed.
And I believe he was a
And
member
same
of
way
the.
with law enforcement today.
Yeah.
When he left to go work in his blacksmith shop, he thought he was going to be working on horseshoes and probably buggies and wagons and so on.
Just hammering stuff around,
Yeah.
just working on a project for the
That's
day.
right.
And the mayor said, "We got to serve this warrant."
That's
And
right.
he said, "Okay, I'm gonna put on my law enforcement hat,
Yeah.
serve a warrant," and then boom,
Yeah. And
changed lots of lives, but
I
maybe
think-
for the better.
I think the Moore family, I think they had been run out of Gaston County and maybe Cleveland County.
Yep.
And for the same thing.
Same thing,
running these
The house
houses.
of ill repute.
Yeah, running these houses, and
Yeah.
ended up in Sharon.
Yeah.
Of course, let me say this. People say, well, why in the world would they end up in a little tiny place like Sharon? Folks, Sharon wasn't a tiny place
Back then.
in 1918.
Yeah.
Sharon was a booming little city in York County.
Mm-hmm.
Car dealership, so on and so on.
And it was a big cotton fields. They were surrounded by cotton fields.
Oh man!
So they probably were big in the
gins,
gin-
cotton
yep.
gins and everything that was going on in Sharon, and it was a very thriving little city.
Enough to where the townspeople knew Mr. Penninger and said, "Hey, we're going to raise up $200 so you can help find these guys." And they,
Oh yeah,
Probably helped.
obviously there was a lot of love for the man.
yeah. So,
Yep.
well, awesome, Sheriff. I appreciate you coming.
Hey, this has been fun.
It has been
It
fun.
has been fun.
I was going to get you on the podcast eventually anyway. Just talk about. I mean, but I was like, I was doing all this, and I figured I was like, I need to get the guy who, in here who gave me the poster in the first place, because I don't think people want to sit here and just listen to me talk for 30 minutes.
Well,
and then just read
yeah.
over everything we've gone through.
Well, I've
But-
enjoyed it. I really have to rehash and think about this again. And the lives of law enforcement is so important to me and what's going on in America, especially today.
Yes, sir.
With law enforcement and all the different movements and what law enforcement has to deal with. And there's never a day go by that I don't lift law enforcement up in prayer and ask God to protect these men and women that's out here protecting us, just like our uniformed soldiers, whether they in foreign lands or whether here in America. They all here to protect us. And when we lose our respect for them because of what you may see
Yes, sir.
on a newscast,
Right.
to lose respect for them, that is so unfair
Very.
to the law enforcement family. Are they bad policemen? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every policeman walks is a great person. We all know better than that. But I look and I think about how many bad attorneys and doctors and
Even some teachers, maybe. out there.
teachers
I
and
mean,
even news reporters, Trent.
Nope. I have worked here longer
saved
than I
you.
ever did in news. I have now worked here longer than I ever did in news.
So there are, but I just asked our community, and I thank our community for standing behind our officers the way they have.
Yes, sir.
We are so blessed in York County that people care about our people that wear the badge.
And it proves back from 102 years ago into today.
Amen.
I mean, you do have
Amen.
some that don't, but
Yep.
we do it for the most part.
Yep.
And thank you for everything you're doing for law enforcement in the State House. So
Yeah,
keep
hey.
up doing the good work, even though you might have a couple arguments with some
I have
some
a
of
few
those.
arguments and some pretty big battles down at the State House, but hey, I do the best I can.
Yes, sir. Well, awesome. Well, that's it for today, folks. Thanks for listening to the podcast. This is York County Sheriff's Office Behind the Badge, and we got a good look behind the badge and the former badge of the sheriff of York County and the badge of T.R. Penninger, who gave his life 102 years ago this week, and the behind the badge of Sheriff Quinn, who tracked down the people that killed him. And so we're just glad you're here. Don't forget, go sign up for those Notify Me alerts on YorkCountySheriff.com. Also follow us on our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and so on and so forth. And the old-fashioned way, go tell your friends about the podcast, because that's the best way to tell the folks to come listen. And it's just a simple look behind the badge and using this platform to remind folks that how officers give their lives every day. We run to danger when others are walking away. So thanks for listening.